The year is 1588. England is on the brink of annihilation.
From the cliffs of Dover, soldiers stare at a horizon filled with Spanish sails, more than 100 warships, the greatest armada the world has ever seen. But somewhere far from the coast, in a dim study near the Thames, a man leans over a candle, tracing circles and numbers on a sheet of parchment. Not spells, not prayers, calculations. He lifts his pen and whispers, "Do nothing. Let the sea fight for England." Days later, the wind changes. A massive storm tears through the channel, scattering Spain's mighty fleet like toys in a bathtub. England is saved. Was it luck? Was it science? Or had this man, somehow, read the mind of God? His name was John Dee. Mathematician, astronomer, alchemist, spy, and the world's first real 007. John Dee was born in London, 1527, a world split between faith and reason. His father was a minor courtier to King Henry VIII. His mother, a woman of quiet piety. At 15, Dee entered Cambridge. He slept only 4 hours a night, chasing the secrets of every discipline he could find. Greek, Latin, geometry, astronomy, law, medicine, theology. He devoured everything that promised a glimpse of how the universe worked. He once wrote, "I am consumed by an unquenchable thirst for knowledge." By 21, he was lecturing in Paris, dazzling Europe's greatest minds. In front of a packed auditorium, he introduced something no one had seen before: the symbols plus, times, and divided by. Simple signs that would change mathematics forever. They called him the English Euclid. But Dee wasn't interested in fame. He wanted truth, the hidden laws beneath the surface of all things. At a time when science and magic were twins, not enemies, Dee saw no boundary between them. To him, the motion of planets and the whispers of angels were both part of God's grand design. When Dee returned to England, he found a nation trembling. The Reformation had torn the country apart. Kings had fallen. Faith itself had become a weapon, but Dee saw opportunity. He believed knowledge could heal, that mathematics could serve God and crown alike. He published The Mathematical Preface, a book that argued geometry was the key to navigation, engineering, even morality. It became the foundation for England's age of exploration. Through Dee's methods, ships could now calculate their latitude by the stars, not by superstition. He taught that the universe was measurable, that understanding the heavens meant mastering the seas. Centuries later, historians would say, John Dee gave England the math to rule the waves. When Elizabeth I took the throne in 1558, England was exhausted. Her half-sister Mary had left the country divided, poor, and spiritually torn apart. The Pope wanted her dead. France and Spain watched hungrily from across the sea. But Elizabeth had something no other monarch had a mind she could trust. John Dee. He was not a nobleman, not a warrior, not a cleric. He was a thinker, a man who claimed that the universe itself could be read like a divine manuscript. When Elizabeth first summoned Dee to court, she was barely 25, and he, 31. He arrived with a worn leather case of star charts and geometrical tables. She asked, "Can you read the heavens, Dr. Dee?" He smiled slightly. "I can read their pattern, Majesty, but only God writes their purpose." From that moment, she listened. It was Dee who chose the day and hour of her coronation, aligning celestial configurations to promise prosperity and power. Court chroniclers later noted that the heavens shone clear that morn, and the queen's face did glow as if lit by their favor. But Dee offered more than superstition. He showed Elizabeth the world literally. In a private audience at Hampton Court, he unfurled one of the most accurate world maps of his age. Using geometry and reports from navigators, he explained how England could one day challenge Spain's maritime dominance. He pointed at the Atlantic and said, "Majesty, knowledge is the true empire. Whoever maps the world commands it." That single sentence shaped England's destiny for centuries.
The geometry dictates
Elizabeth
the
made
optimal
Dee
route for
her
the fleet,
scientific
minimizing
and
losses.
navigational advisor. He trained her explorers, including Sir Francis Drake and Sir Walter Raleigh, in the new art of celestial navigation. He taught them to measure latitude by the North Star and to chart longitude by lunar eclipses. In his home at Mortlake, on the banks of the Thames, Dee built what was astonishingly the largest private library in Europe. Over 2,600 manuscripts, including works on mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, optics, and ancient mysticism. Visitors said the place felt more like a temple than a study filled with globes, astrolabes, mirrors, and mysterious instruments of brass and crystal. It was here that England's age of discovery truly began, not in the decks of ships, but in the silence of Dee's study. But genius attracts suspicion. As the Queen's fame grew, so did her enemies, Catholic assassins, foreign agents, traitors within her court. Elizabeth needed someone who could travel unnoticed, gather intelligence, and report directly to her. Someone with intellect, loyalty, and a mind built for codes. John Dee fit perfectly. He had studied cryptography in Louvain, mastered steganography, the art of hiding secret messages within innocent texts, and understood human psychology like few others. He became Elizabeth's invisible weapon. Using his scholarly reputation as cover, Dee roamed across Europe on what he called scientific pilgrimages. In truth, he was mapping alliances, assessing threats, and intercepting foreign correspondences. In his letters to Elizabeth, he began signing with a unique symbol, 2 circles and a 7, 007. The circles represented eyes, the Queen's eyes. The 7, the number of divine perfection, protection, and fate. The meaning was simple, for Her Majesty's eyes only. Centuries later, novelist Ian Fleming would stumble across Dee's signature in old papers at Trinity College. It inspired him to give his fictional spy the same code number. But Dee was no fantasy. He was the real intelligence behind the birth of England's Secret Service. In Prague, Dee attended alchemical gatherings, pretending to seek spiritual enlightenment while secretly noting which European nobles were sympathetic to Spain. In Poland, he met agents of the Holy Roman Empire and collected rumors of naval preparations. In Antwerp, he exchanged ciphered messages disguised as mathematical formulas, his numbers masking state secrets. One letter, now preserved in the British Library, reads like a riddle of stars and angles, yet hides a warning about a planned assassination attempt on Elizabeth. To her dying day, she trusted his insight completely. At court, she once told her ministers, "Dr. Dee sees what others cannot. He reads not only the skies but men." He wasn't just her magician. He was her shadow, the invisible guardian of her throne. By 1588, the storm clouds over Europe were no longer metaphorical. Philip II of Spain had assembled an armada 130 warships, 30,000 men, a floating fortress, to crush Protestant England and restore Catholic rule. Panic gripped London. Church bells rang night and day. People whispered of the apocalypse. And once again, Elizabeth turned to the man who saw patterns where others saw chaos, John Dee. He studied the tides, the lunar cycles, the jet streams of wind known only to the most experienced mariners. He spent nights in the tower at Greenwich, staring through his astrolabe at the heavens. Dee predicted the Spanish fleet would meet God's fury upon the sea. A storm in late summer, fierce enough to scatter even the largest ships. He advised Elizabeth to delay the English Navy's direct engagement, to hold the line and wait for the storm. It was a bold decision that many thought cowardly, but Dee's calculations were precise.
It was the greatest armada the world had.
When the Spanish fleet entered the English Channel, the weather turned. Winds rose to hurricane force. Thunder roared for 3 days. By the time the skies cleared, more than half of the Armada's ships had been shattered against the rocks. To common folk, it was divine intervention. To Elizabeth, it was the validation of her philosopher. Years later, sailors who survived the tempest swore they saw a strange light over the horizon, a single star burning through the clouds. In taverns and poems, they said it was Dee's lantern, guiding England through the storm. Elizabeth privately called the event the Queen's Miracle. Dee called it the geometry of heaven. That victory changed history. It secured England's survival, birthed its naval supremacy, and ignited a belief that the nation was favored by Providence. But for John Dee, it marked the height of his influence and the beginning of his fall. But victory did not bring peace. Dee's curiosity turned inward toward the divine. He began to wonder whether human reason alone could ever reach the mind of God. Then came Edward Kelly, a mysterious man with cropped ears, punishment for counterfeiting. He claimed he could see angels through a crystal mirror. Together, Dee and Kelly began a strange partnership. For 10 years, they recorded conversations with what they believed were celestial beings. They called the language spoken by these entities Enochian, a grammar and syntax no human had ever seen. To some, it was madness. To others, genius. Modern cryptographers have studied the angelic language and found real structure as if Dee had invented the first artificial code. Was he communing with angels or encrypting divine mathematics? We'll never know. But those who saw him at work said his eyes burned with the same light as his crystal mirror. In 1583, Dee left England for Poland and Bohemia, seeking patronage among European kings. While he was gone, his house in Mortlake was ransacked. His life's work, 2,670 manuscripts, the largest library in England, was burned or stolen. When he returned, the world had changed. Elizabeth was older. The empire he had imagined now belonged to others, men with guns, not telescopes. Soon after, the plague came. It took his wife, Jane, and 4 of their 8 children. He buried them himself. And the man who once charted the heavens now stared at an empty sky. When Elizabeth died in 1603, her successor, James I, despised everything she had loved. To him, astrology was heresy. Alchemy was witchcraft. John Dee, once the Queen's trusted mind, became a symbol of fear. Neighbors called him the conjurer. Pamphlets mocked him as a fool. He spent his last years selling books and casting horoscopes for pennies. In 1608, he wrote one final plea to the crown, asking for recognition or, at least, protection. There was no reply. In 1609, he died alone in Mortlake, aged 82. No monument, no grave marker. The man who gave England its stars was buried beneath an unmarked stone. For centuries, history dismissed him as a crank, a mad alchemist chasing angels. But modern historians see something else. A bridge. John Dee stood at the intersection of science and mysticism, empire and imagination. He saw no contradiction in using numbers to understand God. And though he died forgotten, his fingerprints are everywhere. On the maps that guided explorers, in the instruments that steered ships, and even in the codes that built modern espionage. He believed that the universe could be known, that knowledge was sacred, not forbidden. In his notes, he once wrote, "Through number and proportion, the truth of all things is revealed." 4 centuries later, a writer named Ian Fleming created a character, a British agent, who lived by code, loyalty, and secrecy. He gave him a number, 007. Few realized that number was not fiction, it was history. Because long before James Bond, there was a man who risked everything for queen and country, not with bullets, but with ideas. He fought ignorance. He defied superstition. He believed in the power of the human mind to touch the divine. John Dee, the mathematician who dreamed the empire, the magician who read the stars, the spy who signed 007. A man centuries ahead of his time, who tried to understand the universe, and in doing so, became part of its mystery. If you enjoyed this story, remember, history isn't just what we're told, it's what we rediscover. So, if you want more forgotten stories of the people who shaped the modern world, hit like, subscribe, and join us again, where science meets legend.